I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we're gathered here today to do the business of the county, and we honor you and acknowledge you as the creator of the universe and the author of truth. And we know that if we'll only open our eyes, hearts, minds, and souls to you, that you will guide us in our thoughts, words, and deeds. And Father, we ask all the actions that we do today might honor you, and we bring all of our prayers to you through your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Well, good morning. Huh? He said we didn't have to because he didn't mention it last time and he got an inch of rain. So I'm taking his guidance.
It's a district by district rate.
Must be.
Well, it was finally my turn.
Yep, it was your turn for sure. Well, today our agenda is basically a one-item agenda. We had on the agenda that was published a line item that said business items. It sounds like my mic is really hot here today. But we don't have any particular business items to bring forward today. Some of those will be on Monday's agenda next week on the 18th. So the discussion today, because we have a deadline coming up with regard to notification on our budget, is full discussion, thorough discussion, I guess is a way to say it, with regard to the budget that's been presented to us at this point. So I'm going to, well, let me make one other comment. It's been asked through our commission's members that we go through each of our budget items, our departments and so forth, one at a time. But before we do that and get started department at a time, Robert, any overview, any summary? And I know we had a contract that we're considering with regard to indigent defense services that I don't believe is in this budget. So any summary of things that we need to be aware of as we start this discussion?
Well, really, as we met last Tuesday, I guess it was, we had a pretty thorough review of the budget. You've heard various departments' presentations prior to that and so forth, and my request of the Board of County Commissioners was to go back, review, and provide me with any questions or directions that you may want to, hopefully bringing them back to this meeting so that we can make any final adjustments that may need to be made. And then with the anticipation that when we meet on the 18th, we can go ahead and authorize this budget to be published, and we can send notification off to the county clerk if need be for exceeding revenue neutral if we should. But on Friday, I believe it was, of last week, we did receive a drafted agreement for indigent defense services, and I forward the same to the commission. So at that point in time, it's really in your wheelhouse to make a determination on how you would want to proceed with that agreement. Keep in mind that this board did establish a small ad hoc committee to meet with the indigent defense attorneys, their representatives, and that was Commissioner Dave Jones and Commissioner Bob Chrysler there to discuss that. And if that is the direction, then you would probably need to discuss those types of things as well, so we can get some form of budget number for the for this 23 budget then.
So back to kind of the overview, anything above revenue neutral that we might approve, we definitely will have a hearing, obviously, for that revenue neutral rate and exceeding that. But after that hearing is when we could still lower what we hear as a budget for 2023 if we chose to do that, but we would not be able to exceed that number. Am I correct?
That's
On
correct.
that summary?
That's correct.
Okay. So we'll make sure we're all on the same page with regard to what we're doing. So I'm going to open it up to the commission members. Do you want, on the screen that we have in front of us is the notice of budget hearing. Do you just want to go down the items here, or do you want to go in a different order? How do you want to proceed if we do a department by department? And Dave, you want to, do you
Well,
have a
this-
suggestion on how you want to do that?
It's great to go down this document that you're referring to. However, that doesn't have all the departments on it. So we need to expand a little beyond that before the day's over. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, all right.
In general, you have 14 taxing funds here. And it's, with some of them having multiple departments within them, general fund being that one. I guess in summary, you've heard from some of the departments on their budget and so forth already from this. If you're comfortable in general with that particular fund, then you can go ahead and move on. And if not, if you want to open it up, then we'll do so then at that.
My point is that some come in with almost a flat budget request. There's not much argument about that. Some come in with greatly expanded request.
Sure.
That needs some discussion, so.
So Dave, just continue on then. Where would you like to see us go?
Well, let's start down and what's, the very first department up. Let me get we print things too small. We need larger print. The first department though is Road and Bridge. And,
You want to go to the Road and Bridge Department?
right.
Okay, okay.
And I realize that's multiple departments, but it's a fairly large budget, and asking for an increase, I think maybe we need to discuss it.
Kurt, would you want to come up to the podium, and as we go through the Road and Bridge budget, you can touch base on some of the things that you presented to them a few weeks ago?
I don't have my computer with me. I could go down and get it if you want me to.
What can we hand you, Kurt, that,
Well, I have my own budget sheet with notes and stuff on it that I would typically have here. What questions do you have?
well, I'm just asking for some justification on some of the changes. And then from time to time, over the years, we've discussed some, I'll take noxious weed for example. We've discussed, do they need as much in chemicals as they had the year before? Do they need more? Do they need less? They need to justify it just a little bit, what we're budgeting for. That's my point.
Well, on noxious weed, the issue that we have right now is the price in chemicals. Some of our chemicals have gone up 400%. Other chemicals are actually not even available. Our vendors can bid on the chemicals, but when it comes to actually supplying them, they can't supply them. So the noxious weed portion of the budget was basically the best guess we could come up with as far as, because there's just no way to tell what the price of the chemicals are going to be next year.
I understand your dilemma. I also understand we're trying to budget, and we need to have a limit on what can be spent and not go over that. And so that's our tough job, trying to figure out what's fair to the taxpayer and what's fair to our department. So if we don't know what it's going to cost, how do we budget for it?
Commissioner, I think as he stated, right now, the current pricing on the chemicals is up already 4 times as what traditionally we have paid in the past. So taking the best information that we have available to us is what we utilized in preparing the budget, assuming the same quantities would be used in the upcoming years as in previous years.
We estimated the price that we had hoped they would come down, knowing that they would still be higher than what they normally have been. And then in order to try to supply the same amount, in order to be able to do our KDOT roads with the contract we have with them, in order to do Finney County Public Works, and then in order to be able to sell to the public. So that's why we have an increase in that. But as far as, again, there's no way, even the vendors can't say what the prices are going to be. So we did our best as far as talking with them and trying to figure out what we thought, hopefully, the prices would be. And based on that, that's why we're showing an increase. We don't expect them to come back down to where they were at.
And I saw also in diesel fuel, you have no idea what that's going to cost a year down the road. But it's a dilemma. But we have a duty to establish some kind of a budget that's fair. So I don't know how the other commissioners feel about it. It's just we're sitting here looking at massive increases in some areas and some not.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, I have to take a little exception to that, because, if they used X amount of diesel, you're not gonna use less diesel next year.
That's correct. Yeah.
Today's prices, I don't know what today's prices are, believe me. And I know chemicals prices too, and he is not wrong. If you got to have X amount of chemicals, that's what it's gonna cost. You sure can't put in what last year's cost was. You gotta at least put in what it is today. And you'd be darn lucky to get it for what it is today, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the road and bridge budget. I'm going to look over to Bob and Larry. Any questions to you with regard to road and bridge?
On the bottom section, if you will, of the road and bridge is the non-appropriated balance of 1231. Is that basically money that we had in the 22 budget that we weren't able to get equipment or whatever delivery-wise, and so we're carrying it over?
Yes, that's anticipated carryover then.
But it's not money that's already quote-unquote in the bank.
Correct.
We're treating it as an additional
Correct.
cost for next year.
That's correct.
And so then this year, we'll treat it as a savings to the budget if we're charging it to next year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because really, if you look at the line above that, we're less than $100,000 on 5 million. And where the prices are today compared to where they were when this was done a year ago, I think is very optimistic. So I don't have any other questions.
Larry, do you have any questions?
Just a general comment that everybody's dealing with inflation, and, we've had inflation in our appraisals and everything, and so, I kind of have to look at it from a taxpayer's viewpoint, that you hate to get hit with both appraisal, your appraisal's gone up, and then a mill increase too on top of that. That just kind of compounds the issue. And I don't know how we can budget exactly what the inflation is going to cost, because hopefully, that's a not a good word for government, hopefully. But down the road, this cannot continue, this 8% inflation every year. There will be changes. People will quit spending less, and it will contract. But as far as budgeting, you're looking at crystal ball issues. Well, I don't know. I don't envy you guys, because trying to figure out what it's going to be a year from now. And if you try to cover just what the expenses are this year, that's even hateful. Because that's occurred in 6 months, basically.
And I'll offer my comments at this point. It's a little more global than just road and bridge, but I focus on that budget hearing report and then kind of dig into some of the things that are behind that. And when I look at road and bridge at only a .059 increase, it kind of rides along with what Bob just said a minute ago. I'm not overly concerned about that. What I am concerned about is our projected mill levy, and that's without indigent defense in it, is 51.561, where last year we were at 49.944, and my hope is that we can get closer to that 49.944 with what we do here today. And I just, for rounding purposes, I say 50, and I'm hoping that we can get closer to that 50 mills. That I don't think we can get down to our revenue neutral rate without drastically cutting services, and then we are going to have people hollering because the roads aren't fixed, the safety's not there, and so forth and so on. So I'm looking more at the overall, and with road and bridge, I don't see a significant increase. So that's my comment.
I have
Other comments with regard to road and bridge before we move on?
one, it's not it's a question that due to format, on the road and bridge, and there are several examples in our budget, but on the road and bridge page back in here, the very first line is ad valorem. Except for 23, there's no ad valorem amount.
Okay.
It's a change in the form here.
Yeah, in essence, it's mirroring what the state form is what you're looking at. So if you scroll down to the bottom of that page,
Right.
and you look at the ad valorem line, that's the one that you traditionally see up top.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah.
Any other questions with regard to road and bridge, or any other comments from the two of you? Larry, go.
Just one question. I need to dig into this farther. Where on your capital outlay for equipment, what is your big items that you got coming up that?
Well, as I had mentioned during my budget presentation, that has not really been decided yet, because what I'm going to be doing this end of this year is an equipment utilization analysis to decide on what the highest priority equipment is, and then I really believe that I'm going to be able to, with the new programs that we'll be doing, I really believe we're going to be able to get rid of some equipment. And so before I do a full capital equipment plan, I need to make sure that I'm good with what we need to keep and what we're going to have on hand.
So what you're saying is trends are that we've got enough equipment on hand to handle what we need right now?
It seems like we do. Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind too, Curtis said the last time, we've got a truck that's been ordered that won't be delivered till 2024.
Right. It was ordered last year.
Anything else for road and bridge? Kurt, thank you. Appreciate that. So then the next one we have is aging, if we're kind of going through this list. And comments with regard to that, Robert, anything? we need to be aware of?
Really what you see in the Department of Aging budget is what they have requested. They spoke with you about long-term needing to begin the process of planning for some major capital improvements to that facility that they're in right now. So there is approximately a $22,000 budgetary increase in that.
And the mill increase is .013, if I'm reading the form correctly. Am I reading that right?
Correct.
Comments or questions with regard to the aging department or budget? Larry, anything? Bob?
No.
Dwayne?
No,
Dave?
not really. They
Okay.
they have an old building that once in a while catches them by surprise when a
Yep.
leak develops or whatever, but we've, on a couple of occasions in the past years, have helped them out a little bit when something fell apart.
Yep, that is true. Then we're on,
Excuse me, as a follow-up to that, so there is maintenance that is handled through this budget, but also maybe out of a different pocket through the maintenance of the rest of the county budget?
I'll make my statement, then I'll let Bob respond, or Roberts, I'm sorry, respond. We've got a handful of buildings that are what we call outside agencies, and a handful of different ways to treat them with respect to our maintenance. Some of them, they take care of the maintenance, some of them we do, some of it's a blend. And the senior center is one that they've had to budget for their work in there, but Rex and crew help them out. So therein lies the question, you never quite know what it's gonna cost.
That's correct. Your buildings and ground crew will, on occasion, go down and at least look at the facility and try to gauge whether or not it's something minor that they might be able to just assist them with and getting them up and running again, whether it's a light ballast or something to that effect, or if it's something more entailed, well, then they'll recommend a vendor to contact.
I think we talked about this in January in our work group, that there was gonna be a policy kind of developed to try to differentiate between these different kind of buildings. I like the way you worded that, Dave. Thank you.
yeah, we've had so many things on the plate that one has not been addressed yet. But yeah, you're right, that is one of our objectives, to address that.
Okay.
Anything else with regard to aging? All right, then we have ambulance or EMS. We'll go to that budget next. Anything from an overview standpoint, Robert?
As one of the things that Skylar spoke about on this was, in essence, his replacement and equipment program replacement. And that had to do with, as you recall, the discussion went in their, by way of discussing their box vans that they use, box trucks, ambulances that they use. And they went back to a diesel drivetrain on that. We're consistent and have developed a replacement plan, which is approximately a 7-year plan on that. He has 6 units, down from 8 when I first came on. And at that point in time, then, we have a backup for the current stations, and once they move into their the new facility on the east side of town, they will have a backup there as well. Really nothing extraordinary other than that. I think you'll see that the overall increase was approximately $80,000 for that. Their budget does reflect the wages that was approved by the board, trying to make them a little bit more competitive with some of the outside bordering counties. And it is a little bit more competitive, but still lags behind some of them out there.
Questions and comments about ambulance emergency EMS fund? Dave, I'll look at you first.
Not
Anything?
really, no.
Dwayne? Bob?
No.
Larry?
Well, I think it's important that we stay with our equipment replacement plan that we've had in the past, and it seems to be working, that, don't want to deviate from that, just to save money 1 year, because you'll double up in the following year.
Good point. No, that's a very good point. I mentioned this to Robert just in a side conversation the other day, that I said, we don't want to lose sight of long-term, to do something short-term that may come back and haunt us later. So I think that fits with your thought as well. Okay, so we'll move on then to County Employee Benefit Fund, which we've actually shown a slight decrease mill levy-wise, if I'm not mistaken.
Did you want to touch base on e-management, or are you comfortable where you're at there? E-management is part of the EMS budget as well.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd lost sight of that. Well, let's back up and, yeah, go ahead.
Not that there's anything extraordinary there. I will report that Paul does have staff now.
Pull your mic a little.
Paul has staff now, so when Commissioner Dave Jones mentioned that in a meeting, so now he has somebody to go to, so.
Yeah, keep me on task, because if I forget some of those subgroups,
Yep.
we do need to highlight that. And that's a part of that EMS line item, correct? That you just referenced?
Yes, the focus on e-management's budget, the remainder of this year and upcoming next year is on redeveloping the safety committee and providing a greater training opportunity for both the county agency and outside agencies as well.
Just to keep from flipping pages and coordinating the meeting, I'm just working off a summary page, so keep me on task if I miss some of those. So, anything in regard to emergency management? Okay, we'll move on then to the Employee Benefit Fund and overview, Robert.
Just a reminder, we did see an increase in our health insurance, and even though we were able to absorb that in employee benefits fund, that was really truly due to the fact that we worked on trying to increase the fund balance of that over the last couple of years, which in essence allows us to really maintain a reasonable mill levy rate for the employee benefits portion of it. We did talk last week about the change in workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is in here, so that savings is reflected in here as well. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Quick.
go ahead.
our employees' health insurance went, for fiscal year '23, went up about what percent?
approximately 31%.
31%.
Correct.
And that's even after the contracted negotiator has looked things over and tried to get us the best deal.
That's correct. And if you recall, last fall, we entered into an agreement with Grow Well Clinic. We've seen the utilization by employees and their families sixfold in that, which we anticipate will have a long-lasting benefit to your insurance rates. So it's obviously not reflected here because the rates for '23 are driven by the experience off of '21.
Dwayne, anything from employee benefit?
No, this is probably just for the public benefit. When we talk about salary items on any particular department, that does not include anything like the FICA or Social Security or
Correct,
insurance, anything that's strictly salaries
correct,
in that line item.
correct.
So this employee benefit fund gets kind of large.
Good point.
Divide that by 300 employee guys, and you'll get a shock.
Oh, that's, you made a very valid point, yeah. Bob?
The reimbursements that are kind of down there in the middle, reimbursements, funds, other funds, the 800,000. What is that, please?
Those predominantly are made from funds that are grant-driven, that the grant expenditure or the grant program allows for us to recoup those monies from that grant. And so it pays back the employee benefit fund.
So it goes back into this pocket. Thank
Correct,
you.
yeah.
And then secondly, the FICA, you're basically experiencing a $250,000 increase in FICA. Is that due to the adjustment projected for salaries coming across, or is that
Correct.
replacing some people also?
It is for the budgeted wages that we have within the 23 budget. So if by way of example, that budget is $16 million in wages, then it's at 7.65% of that 16 million.
Okay, thank you.
Larry? Anything, any
No,
comments? Anything else that I've missed with regard to employee benefit fund? Okay. We'll move on then to Economic Development Fund, which is flat from 22. And overview, first of all, Robert?
This is your 1/4% mill levy on this, through this fund. The additional revenue comes from the general fund that we use to supplement then that request. So,
Dave?
No, that is, no question there.
Dwayne? Bob?
Yeah, I think I like the last part of what he said, as long as it still has the impact of the same amount of money expended by the county as they did last year.
Larry?
Nothing.
Okay. Anything else, Robert, there? Okay. So then we have the fair and fairgrounds, and there's a couple components to that. Overview, Robert?
once again on this one here, best planning process for not just the fair activities, but other activities throughout the year. Looking at various potentially improvements down there for equipment reserve and so forth. And so we, if you recall, Angie years ago was trying to set some monies aside for the upgrades to tables and chairs. And so we continue that effort because there is a need for that, and that's part of that $100,000. There's also, I'm trying to recall if there's any other, really don't have any other vehicles set in there. Recall they did just recently purchase a tractor.
Did that
For the
tractor
fairground.
come in?
Yes, it did. It's up and running. Yep. So.
And then with regard to the fairgrounds, we're in the process of doing a structural assessment of the exhibition building. And also, if I'm not mistaken, we have an objective to try to do an assessment of the fairgrounds in total as far as utilization and so forth. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. That is correct. I know that Kurt is still waiting for a response from the architect on getting a structural engineer in to do an assessment of that facility prior to making any improvements.
Dave?
Not really a question, but a reminder of a former discussion about the parking lot at the exhibition building, which as I recall, I think is 23 acres. But we had a discussion at one point in time about abandoning the blacktop on about half of that to save money, and I don't know where that discussion ever went. It maybe is still hanging in the.
In my mind, that's part of that overall assessment of the utilization of that facility down there in that complex, yeah.
Dwayne?
Nothing major, no. You know, with the fair coming up, there's always items that think there is needed, you know, more pins, more panels and all that kind of stuff, but that's always figured into the budget.
Bob?
I guess I'm confused on the analysis of the utilization of the fairgrounds exhibition building and something like that. Who does that study?
That will be a study that we'll open up beginning internally, and then we'll go from there, but it's not a set committee at this point in time. So we're looking at not just the exhibition building, but the fairgrounds grandstand area as well. So we'll have obviously your fair board involved in that as to make a determination on what direction that's going. I know that Roxanne's been involved in preliminary discussions on utilization to try and make that a little bit more useful facility as well. So, but they're really two separate projects. One is the exhibition facility, in essence, trying to bring that up to a standard so it can be utilized in the fashion that it has been identified within your emergency operation plan.
I guess I'm concerned about having the people who use it make the study. I think we need to have someone from outside who looks at all similar type facilities in Kansas and Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska, all around us, that says, all right, here's Garden City, Finney County, and here's where they are, and here's what they have, and here's what they can do. And look at it from an area perspective as a segment of the states, rather than inside looking out and saying, gee, I think we could if. I think there's two different stories being developed there. So I just want to have it out there that I think that deserves a much larger look than just the people here taking a look at it.
Yeah. Well, within the 23 budget, it is not a primary focus. That study is not the primary focus at this point in time. I think as you move forward, yes, you'll get that outside perspective, if you will. And I know that was conversations, I can recall even last year about this time doing that exact same approach, is that, you know, what is the standard now for fairgrounds? What is the standard for county and state fairs at this point in time? Because it's changed dramatically over the years.
And I just want to clarify one point, and then I'll get to you, Dwayne. To emphasize the point Robert just made, we're talking about two different things with regard to the structural piece of the exhibition building because of an emergency management piece, but then the potential of the study with regard to the overall usage of the fairgrounds. So just making sure, and I don't think you've confused that, Bob. I just want to make sure that we're seeing two different things here, two different projects. Dwayne?
I probably just need to point out that as fairs go, they're not all the same. Our numbers for the 4-Hers and the exhibitors keep climbing dramatically. There's going to be a lot of animals down there for this year, for example.
Very good.
And that's just a credit to the Fair Board and the 4-H clubs and the Extension Council on building this participation of the youth, and that's very important, I think, to get these youth involved in something construction, and this fair is the recognition of these youth's efforts. So you can't just randomly say this fairground should be this big. It depends on the local involvement, and I'm going to give kudos to our Fair Board. These people work really, really hard on this.
Larry, any
No, I
comments?
think I'd have to concur with Commissioner Drees.
Oh, it's 4-H and the things working with the youth. I'm right there with you. So we've got to have those positive things going on in the community. Anything else with regard to the fair and the fairgrounds? All right, then we'll move on to county health. And there's a little bit of an increase in county health, and Robert, help us understand that a little bit.
Well, for those commissioners that have been here in the past, if you recall, the county general fund quite often transfers anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000 a year into that fund on an annual basis. That's one thing that you will not see in this budget, as I spoke to you briefly a few weeks back, that I'm not one to necessarily do a lot of transfers unless it is more of an emergency type situation that we need to shore up things. So in essence, I think you're seeing a true reflection here within this budget. Additionally, you will recall that the struggles of the county in competing with the outside agencies and even regional basis to attract nurses and so forth. As with your new health director here, we've been able to streamline a few things and actually try to reduce the number of individuals, but we're still really pretty far behind on our RNs, if you recall. So I think that's about the best I can tell you. The clinic is no longer down there. That's no longer an expense of that as well. So
Most of the increase can be attributed to the fact that there's no transfer into the health department is what I'm hearing from your summary. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Larry, we'll start with you.
You look on personal services under general health, that's the big increase. Is that where you're picking up your RN cost? And
Yes.
because it's pretty big jump. You can look back over the years.
Now grant revenues will pick up a lot of that as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anything else, Larry?
No,
And the grant revenues are included in here to offset that?
Grant revenues are included in there. There is, though, some one-time grant revenues that are pretty restrictive on what you could use it on. So we did through that grant program provide some hiring incentives based upon that, and we still have the need for some COVID-related employees there. Very few. I think we may be down to 2.
And that's what represents the net drop in the expense budget for the year?
Correct.
And will that be a recurring grant thing, or you think this is kind of the last time for that to happen?
Ask that question one more time, please.
In other words, we were able, in your budget request, we were able to drop the total amount of money for operating the health department this projected year due to those transfers or grants or whatever source of money.
Yes.
Are those sources over, in your opinion?
Yes, the one time for the health department, yes, they will be, yeah. I think they will end the middle of next year, June 30th of next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And relatively on the first page there, where are those grants?
As you see, as you see in the grant revenue, you'll go down in the categories there, you'll see state and federal aid.
So that 1,285,000,
Yeah, 6.5.
okay, thank you.
Dwayne? Dave?
Couple outside programs fit into this, and they're budgeted from federal funds like WIC, and
Correct?
there's another program, I think, but
Yes,
we don't see that here, however, they're occupying.
Correct. You'll have, you have about 7 grant programs as well as your WIC program.
And then in the grant program, isn't there a kind of an annual grant from the KDHE from the state of Kansas?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, you'll have your,
Keep coming.
yes, yeah.
Thank you.
We think, yeah. Based on what we know today.
Yeah.
Anything else with regard to the health department? Because keep in mind, that is one of the mandates that we have, one of the 6 mandates. Road and bridge was one, and health is definitely another one. If there's nothing else, let's go to the historical museum line item. And there's actually just a slight decrease in the mill levy for '23.
There's a slight decrease, but the expenditures stay the same as requested.
Well, correct, yeah, good point. Thanks for completing my sentence, and I appreciate that. So questions, comments, or anything else from an overview standpoint first? Larry, any?
No, other than they do a lot to raise outside sources of revenue. So it's
Good point.
good for them.
Bob?
No, I think it's just great what they do for the community.
Dwayne?
Comment.
I echo the remarks of the fellow commissioners. They do a great job.
Yep, they do. And like Larry's started the conversation, the outside sources, and I really compliment any organization that goes and tries to do the outside fundraising and lessen the burden on the taxpayers overall. Okay, library. Robert, let you give any overview comments?
General overview is the expenditure side of it is as per our agreement. You'll see that the ad valorem tax is up slightly, approximately $22,000. If you recall, we did within our fiber project back in 2020 provide fiber to that, as well as some upgrade to hardware, and I'm going to look at Doug on that as well. Is that correct? Okay. So we tried to assist them in maintaining a little bit more technologically advanced, if you will, system down there.
So I'll look at Dave first.
Well, their IT program, it gets to be a kind of a almost confusing thing in that LS&S has their own IT structure.
Correct.
And trying to make that fit together with Doug's program has been a challenge, but I'm going to credit Doug. They've made it work. And so the IT service at the library, I think, is pretty dependable right now. It had a struggle for a while, but and then this is one of those that we're constantly reminded about what the taxpayers allowed or enabled, and that was up to 1.9 mils of support for the library annually. So the budget request you said this year is under the 1.9.
That's correct.
So that's all I have.
Yep. Dwayne?
Nothing to add. I was just going to point out the mill levy limit on this one as well. So thank you, Dave.
Bob?
Nothing.
Well, you know, after being on the library committee for a few years, that it was interesting that we've spent a lot of money on that building to upgrade it and to get it modernized and HVAC and lighting and everything. So we've tried to make it efficient for them to use and lower their costs. And I think what Doug and we've done with on the IT side has been a great benefit too. That looks to me like it's in pretty good shape if we can just get LS&S to pare back their contract a little bit, we'll be in great shape.
We'll negotiate that,
Yeah, we'll negotiate that one.
And from my perspective, Doug, would you step to the podium just for a minute, please? I just simply, we've referenced IT 2 or 3 different times with regard to the library. From your perspective, anything we're missing from a budgetary standpoint with regard to IT, or are you feeling as we are here that we're in pretty good shape?
It is in pretty good shape. Their IT company that they use is kind of a requirement for libraries. Working with them is more of a challenge due to them being so far away that there's a lot of a timing issue. It's not that they're difficult to work with, it's just there is a timing issue in getting anything accomplished between the two groups to make sure everything's working at the same time. So kind of a necessary evil for their system, but it works reliable now, and that's kind of the goal.
All right, thank you. Wanted to clarify that.
Question, do they operate any other libraries in this area?
No, not in this area. The LS&S, this is the only library with the system that we have with the locally appointed board with the authority that the library board has. They have several other city libraries, for example, where the city council runs it, but not a library board like this. So it's kind of a unique thing.
Any other comments before we move on? Robert, the next one, intellectual disability service. Overall?
Overall, there's no change in expenditures. This is the one that you fund RCDC out of and SDSI out of. Same dollar amount. For the most part, the ad valorem tax is relatively stable as well from last year. So no real change.
I'll start with Dave. Any questions or comments? Dwayne?
Nope.
Bob?
No.
And Larry? Okay. And then we've already talked slightly about noxious weed. Any reason to go back into that part of the budget? From your perspective, Robert? Board members?
No, I think we covered it.
Okay. And then the one that's showing the largest amount of increase, mill levy-wise, is law enforcement, and there's several components to the law enforcement budget. And so, Robert, would let you lead off with the overview.
Sure, absolutely. If you recall, earlier this year, board agreed to sign an agreement for nursing services at the jail. That agreement is approximately $225,000. In addition to that, then had slight increase in commodities as well. That's really the main influence for the overall sheriff's budget was really through the jail. Slight increase in investigation. Overall, from the standpoint of that budget, approximately 400,000 increase there. And then as well within the law enforcement budget, you do have county attorney's budget, and you'll see that that increase is approximately $865,000
generated just about 500,000, is that correct?
544,000.
544?
Yep.
So, we'll go in, let's talk about the sheriff's piece of this first, and then the county attorney's piece, so that we're not confusing the two issues. And look at Dave first.
Well, I see a pretty substantial increase, and I'm wondering, where can we pare it down? At the rate of the requested increases, we're looking at a mill levy of what, 51 point, whatever it is,
Yep, about 51.
51.561. And is there a place that Mike can agree that, hey, we could hold off on that, we can make an adjustment? Is there anything at all that we can negotiate and get that down a little? So, to me, I'm not a sheriff, and we need to have him participate in, if we're gonna do some trimming, where would we trim?
Definitely, we'd want Mike in the discussion if we're talking about that, but let's go through comments first, or any questions before Mike would come to the podium.
I'll save mine for when Mike gets up.
Okay?
Yeah, on the second page, when we have the sheriff's total, and then we have the county attorney, and then we have the total expenditures. In 2020, we were 10.6, in 21, we were 10.9. This year, we're budgeted at 8.1, and now we're looking at 9.3. What did we take out that's different?
Actually, as Commissioner Dries pointed out, is that those employee benefits are no longer in that fund, and that was the change.
And relatively, what is that the difference between the 10 and the 8, the $2 million worth of employee benefits?
Roughly that, yeah.
So if we put those 2 million back up, we would be at 1.1, whereas in 21, we were at 10, well, almost 11 million. Am I using that
think
example
so.
about right?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay. So we're not quite as bad as what this looks like. Thank you.
Larry, any general comments?
No, I'll wait till we get it.
Mike, why don't you come up to the podium and give us the Cliff Notes version of your presentation, and you've heard the question already asked. Is this the bare bones budget? Is there anything that could be cut from what's been proposed and so forth? So I'll just let you take it from there and then field questions as we have them.
As the Administrator Reese said, most of that is the jail nursing, the contract we did, that's 220. We've also, I think there's some contractual stuff we've added we didn't have in the past. I think there's a Johnson Controls for the fire system. That's always been debated, I think, in years past. Do we pay at the sheriff's office, or does maintenance pay it? I think we've decided this year, because we kind of control it over there, it probably ought to be ours. And I think that's a $27,000 increase there. I think we've upped for vehicles. I've been buying vehicles for the sheriff's office for years, probably since '97. First time I've ever, and I agree with Commissioner Jones here that it can't keep going up like that. But I think we've seen a $10,000 to $15,000 increase per vehicle. I know, I was just talking to the guys the last time that we bought those Dodge Durangos. I think they were right around 33,000. This year, they were 43 for the same vehicle. Even the pickups, we were kind of pushing to go back to pickups, but you know, the first pickups I bought in '97 for the sheriff's office, I think we paid 24. I bet we could probably have that. If we had that pickup, we could probably sell it this year for that same price. So there's some of our increase. We increased that budget. Fuel, obviously, we've increased that one. Trying to think off the top of my head what else.
Well, just talk about,
Jail food, yeah, I mean, it's like you say, everything's is rising and,
I know you addressed it some in your budget presentation, but talk about the personnel side, whether you're trying to hire new ones. I know we had market adjustments that we adopted last meeting, but personnel-wise, you're down how many?
we're down, somewhere around, I think it's 13, 14. We just had one resign. Beth is stealing my people. I'm gonna go steal some of hers. No, I didn't, we're not. But no, so I think we're down like 13, and those are probably all, once we're moving around, it actually kind of goes back to the jail, because that's where they come in at. So yeah, we need to fill those up in the jail, just because of our numbers of inmates we have. So, safety reasons, overtime reasons, we don't want to burn the ones we do have out. I have tried to move some around for safety purposes. The times have changed, and when Sheriff Baskey was here, I discussed that with him at our civil process. We just, we have servers out there. We don't have any certified gun-toting, vest-wearing people serving papers in today's world. I think that could be very dangerous. And so I have slowly moving to a certified division there, moving people in that are, so that costs a little more. Equipment cost. Right now, we're moving one person in there. We usually have 3 to serve civil, so we'll still have 2 that are non-certified. But over time, I'd like to see them all certified in that division, just for safety reasons.
Well, we'll start with the questions from the board members, and Larry?
Couple questions. Have you been approached by outside agencies to house inmates, and do you think you need to adjust costs on that if you decide to do it, or if you even are able to do it?
We have been approached by Sedgwick County. I know they're in dire needs. They're closing down pods in their jail because they just don't have staff. Of course, they house, 1,500 to 2,000 inmates, and I think when they contacted us, they were down 70-some officers in the jail. At that time, we were down 10 officers in the jail, and of course, we only at that time had 100 inmates, which we kind of felt was kind of equivalent, that if we opened up an area that we have done in the past for Sedgwick County, we wouldn't be able to staff it, just like they can't staff theirs. So that was the only reason. We didn't tell them actually no, we just told them it just wouldn't work for us right now.
Also, with this new healthcare folks in your inmate population, have you seen a decrease in your use of prescriptive drugs?
We haven't started our new, I think this is scheduled to start the 15th of this month. So here in a few days, between ACH and ourselves, we found a nurse, and yeah, there's not a lot of RNs out there. We were asking for one, we got a LN, LPN. So I'm hoping when we get him up there that we see a decrease. And right now I'll give you an example. We had one just the other day. We brought in, and the guy's walking, talking, seems fine. The next thing I know, I hear Skylar's group being dispatched to the jail, and we end up having to send him to ER because we didn't have a nurse on staff. I think if we'd had a nurse, we could have probably avoided that ER, because I'm pretty sure he was faking, but we can't take that chance. And I know Skylar's guys, their group, they do a good job, and that's not their call to make. We're here we think this too, but we're not the experts yet. So I hope stuff like that'll be prevented.
Okay, thank you.
Earlier this year, when you were here sharing with us some of the challenges that you have, and in terms of jail wages, jail keepers' wages, the new structure that's set up, will it make it more possible for you to compete with the City of Garden City Police Department to where we can keep the people we train?
I hope so. Of course, there's a difference in the jail than what the police department obviously doesn't run the jail. They don't have jail staff, but their patrol division is a little higher than what we're starting in the jail. I'm just hoping that the type of people we're attracting to the jail right now is not the type of people that would go to their patrol division because they're not old enough. We're looking at 18, 19, 20-year-old, some are 21. You have to be 21 to be on a patrol division. So I'm hoping because we upped our patrol division to be pretty compatible to the cities that they'll want to stay with us and eventually come to our patrol division and not the cities.
But what we were seeing was that when they graduated from the jail position and were ready to go out into the field or into one of the other areas, the maximum rate increase you could have, which is 10% per policy, the existing wage plus the 10% was still below what the city was starting, and I think that was the problem, and hopefully
this
this
yeah,
new
yeah.
structure will get you competitive.
I think we'll have more of them up there that are currently there, obviously, that'll move up, that will probably put a stop to that. Hopefully we'll put a stop to that.
Yeah, so hopefully we don't spend all of the time getting someone indoctrinated and trained and then passing them on. Thank you.
Dave?
This little bitty thing, Mike, but last Monday, as I was going through my stack of bills, I noticed some charges that I felt were unusual from the sheriff's office, and that was AT&T telephone service. When most all of the county is on internet protocol phones, can you tell us, it was not a big amount, but why, for example, your record section has AT&T phone?
I'm not sure.
And then the animal control officers, and that probably was a mobile device. I don't know. It was just a bill from AT&T,
And I know we're trying to, and we have AT&T, or I'm pretty sure we do. I have to get Robert Hahn and ask him that, but I know he and I have been discussing that, the AT&T. I know, I know we're talking to Dory, and we're kind of putting things in different line items, and I think it's all coming out of the records division now, I think, for the phones, for the whole department, I believe, if I'm correct. I know we're trying to restructure that so we quit having all the bouncing all over the place, but, so that may be why it looks like an increase.
it just seemed odd that that was the only department that had AT&T, and that was you. So I don't have any.
I would say with regard to that, Mike, something just to look into and be aware of.
Yeah, and I know I've talked to Robert Hahn, I just can't remember my conversation off the top of my head. I've had so many with different, so.
Dwayne?
Mine's just kind of redundant. I missed your presentation. I was playing farmer cutting wheat. So on your vehicle rotation, has anything changed? Do you have same set of numbers of vehicles a year? I know the prices go up.
Yeah, I think we were looking at, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 a year that we're trying to get, replaced.
Basically the same rotation.
Yes.
Just reflecting
Yeah.
today's
Yes.
crazy market.
And I don't tell my dad, but I don't think we're going back to Dodges. He's a Dodge guy, but we've had some problems with those. I hope they're not listening anywhere.
Yeah, we'll make sure he's not watching today.
Yeah.
Larry?
Mike, over the years, you've always had your own separate IT department. Is there still thoughts emerging with the rest of the county department, or is that still? I remember Kevin used to say it was because you had different requirements, and it was he had all kinds of reasons.
And that is one thing I did sit down with Robert Hahn, I discussed in depth many times. And it's to my understanding, I know there are some requirements that we have over there just because of the law. And Robert has thrown the law on my desk and read this, and I know because of law, we have to have certain things. And I think one of those that established that we have to have a law enforcement presence within the sieges or whatever it's called, that to run that. So if we were to combine with Doug's people, we would have to have somebody from our agency still overseeing that. It would still have to come from us by law. So nothing against Doug, it's just that I didn't write the law. So.
I just didn't know if down the road there'd be a cost savings of putting both of them together, and
And I don't know what the possibility of doing that, but by that law, statute, we would have to have somebody like Robert overseeing our portion of it anyway.
Any other questions to Mike with regard to the sheriff's portion of the law enforcement budget?
Tell us what we can trim.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not hearing very much that
Yes.
can be trimmed.
it's, you know, like I said, it's just I think for us this year was kind of the nature of the beast. Some of it was needing a nurse in the jail, but some of it was just the rising cost that we can't control. You know, if we're gonna provide a service, we've gotta have vehicles. I guess if we went to bicycles instead of cars, I don't know how the guys would like that. That's a long trip out to Dwayne's place if we had to go out there.
Considered Harleys.
Oh, Harley.
I understand.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. So with regard to the county attorney's portion of the budget, any overall comments before we get into questions and call up representative from the county attorney's office?
No, I have no other question, or comments.
Okay. So you want to come up and, well, just a minute. Any just general comments about the county attorney's budget like we did on the sheriff's, where we had a couple of things that we posed to Robert, and then we'll have Susan at the podium?
On the county totals, county attorney totals on page 2 of 2, here again, we went from 2.1, 2.2, down to 1.6, and now up to 2.5. What was that great big drop between the 21 and 22 budget?
Excuse me, once again, benefits aspect of it was not in the current year budget. That's,
Sorry, I didn't understand that.
the benefits, employee benefits is one of those things that was not within that budget.
So 336, 536, about $600,000 drop. It just seemed like a lot. I was trying to figure out, you know, the progression as to where we were, where we are. So, okay, that's all I had.
Okay, so let's, I'll look at Dave first. We've got Susan at the podium, and questions, comments?
Well, again, much like Mike, Susan's request for increase was substantial, and a lot of that looks to be for personnel. And then we get a backup request from the indigent defense trying to match your salaries. And to me, the two kind of go hand in hand for budgeting. If we're gonna consider budgets, we need to be kind of realistic. And Susan, as honest as I can be with you, I cannot support at this point voting for the increases you're asking for. So therein lies the issue. So just being honest with you.
There is the issue because this is not one that is new to the five of you. It was been brought to your attention way back in, I believe, March or April of this year. One of the first things I'd like to point out is the voters have voted me to be the chief law enforcement officer in this county. And as such, over the last 9 years, I have consistently come in under budget. I don't think there's anybody that can argue with that. I've also planned ahead, so when it's come to trying to get new software, when there's been things that need to be fixed in our office, traditionally that has come out of our budget. It has not come out of maintenance. It hasn't come out of anyone else's budget. It's come out of ours when we needed to have it done. I planned ahead for the case management software by setting aside funds 2 years in advance out of that, say, slush that was there so that it wouldn't have to be requested in my annual budget. So those things have not had to have been absorbed by the county per se in a budgetary line item. So when it comes to this issue of salaries, we were made acutely aware of that through some personnel who have now left and/or were planning on leaving. Because of those issues, I've done extensive research across the state. I've backed that up. It's in your budgetary packet with 2 letters from both of our law schools within the state of Kansas that identify that we are underpaying our at least initial attorneys as they're coming out of law school by roughly $10,000 to $20,000. When I look at that, I compare it with what's being paid to my current staff, some of which have been there over 33 years. And quite frankly, are making less money today than they were 10 years ago when I came on board, because Capers has increased, their insurance has increased, their benefits have decreased under that insurance. And now we've got this cost of living issue that really hasn't been addressed year to year by the commission, because we've had years where we've gotten 0 raise or 1% raise, which isn't even a cost of living increase. That all adds to this very, very painful year that we have this year. And it adds to the fact that I can't pay the attorneys I have in my office what they deserve to be paid, one, and what's competitive across the state. So when I presented to you this budget, it was after extensive research. It was after talking to multiple county attorneys across the state on what they're doing. I've even talked to potential hires about what their expectations are, and it comes down to several things. One, the cost of living here is not as cheap as everybody thinks it is when you compare it with that across the state. Somebody can live in Kansas City cheaper than they can live here. And they're willing to do that because they have all the other benefits there. They've got sporting events, they've got nightlife, they've got the ability to find people to hang out with that are younger if they are not married. So we have to couple that, or I have to take a look at that when I'm setting salary structure here. And what is being paid to those who are leaving here in the very same, leaving here, going to be a prosecutor in another county. What's the difference in pay? $20,000, same amount of experience. That's what I'm looking at. So I feel like when I've given you this budget, I'm giving it to you in good faith with a lot of research. A lot of time went into it and a lot of thought. But it's disheartening that you don't feel like you can support it, because I feel like I have presented something very fair and that's taken into account multitudes of things. What's going on here, what's going on across the state, and the people that I have working for me. And I feel very strongly that especially for one who's been there for 33 years, to be making the same amount or damn close to it that she was making in 1995 is pretty shameful.
I have
Go ahead.
well, I'm going to potentially offend you, and it's not my intent, but I hear some criticisms, and I'm going to share them with you.
Please do.
Start off with the top 2 attorneys in your office, you and your assistant, neither one try cases. Number 2, the hours of work or the hours in the office are subject to some scrutiny from outsiders, particularly attorneys, saying Susan doesn't spend much time in the office and the assistant about 10 hours a week. Now, I don't know what if any defense you have for that, but if in my inquiry of surrounding county attorneys' offices, even counties of similar size, most of the county attorneys go to court and try some cases. So that's to begin with. Then you have a couple vacant attorney positions that we keep budgeting for, but you've not been able to replace them. And so where does that money go? Again, in the area of criticism, I hear from some attorneys and some others that you buy new furniture. Well, I'm saying there's a perception problem that for whatever reason, Susan, needs to be addressed. So that in large part is why I have trouble saying, gee, let's grant this, what was it, nearly $900,000 increased request that you had over the previous budget. So that, to me, needs some justification. And if I offended you, my apologies, but it's just what the taxpayers are looking at, that, and they're the ones funding the budget, so.
You haven't offended me in the least, and let me start with my deputy. So my deputy, and I believe I've had this conversation with the chair, she handles every case that comes through that office at one point in time or another. She is the charging attorney, so she does all of the charging that comes through that office and/or the declines that come through that office. We will exceed, I'm going to guess, this year over 3,000 cases that we'll receive from law enforcement, of which we will only charge roughly 600 to 700 because there's other issues that are out there. When you look at that volume and what she's doing every single day, it'd be pretty unfair to say that she wasn't doing anything. I mean, I don't know how you can say she's not doing anything. There would be a couple of things I'd say with regard to me. My position has become very administrative. When we look at constantly dealing with bad attitudes in the office, trying to figure out restructuring when we have an attorney leave, we have an assistant leave. I fill in those dockets where I need to fill in. In fact, last week I was doing a PC docket because we had an attorney that wasn't there. So that, coupled with the fact that I will spend an inordinate amount of time on the phone trying to recruit, I spend time on the phone with community members or bringing them into my office, or as the sheriff can attest, we spent a couple hours just a month ago dealing with a community member who was very upset about the course of an investigation. So I don't know how you put quantity of time to the things that we do within our office. Carrying a caseload, it would be pretty difficult for me to do that. That's the other thing I talked about with the chair. When I have, okay, like say for instance, we have a murder trial, then our recruiting time at the University of Kansas is September 18th, and that's when that murder trial gets set. How do I recruit and carry a caseload? It's a question I'm asking. And at this point, I've tried to do the recruiting because I think that's important. If we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have the attorneys that we have in our office today.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
We've had a discussion as a board about potentially employing the services of what's the right term? Somebody to come in and study the workforce of our county and why we have turnover in certain areas and not so much in others, and what I call look at the brand of the county.
Right.
If that firm were employed, would you allow them to come and take a close look also at your department?
I don't have any reason not to. In fact, my deputy and I sit down weekly at least and try to think, what is it we're doing wrong? We try to take a look at things that we maybe have done that we could do better. We've talked to our staff about different things. You know, we are at this point, we're so understaffed, we don't know where else to go. But it's been a constant problem, and so the first place I always look is at myself.
Well, it's just based on my personal experience. Pay is one thing that can attract or keep somebody, but it's not the only thing.
Nope.
So there's some other things potentially going on that as a commission, we'd kind of like to know about, so.
I think there's a lot of things going on at this point in time. It's just exacerbating what has been an ongoing problem for our office. We haven't ever been fully staffed. So the reason why, part of the reason why we come in under budget is because we don't have the staff. And I've been the first to admit that to you guys. But then I've also taken that and used it to a benefit for this case management system, which we think will help. To some degree, it helps, but we have to have people to learn how to use it. That's the other thing. You know, we sit down, we're the ones adding the statutes to our own system. We're the ones that are making the changes to our own system. And that's through the efforts of the deputy and myself. We're not asking our other attorneys to do that, but that takes an inordinate amount of time to figure out how these processes work, how to program them, and how to move them forward. So, I mean, I'd like to be able to tell you, sure, there's days I'd love to be in court instead of doing what I'm doing, for sure.
Do me for now.
Dwayne?
I guess, Bob, just in sticker shock, you're up 53% over last year on wages alone, and it seems like just a lot to me, 50%.
Well, if you'll recall, when we had our first conversation back in April, the discrepancy between the salary scale that the commission had passed and what the attorneys were making for the time period that they had been there or for their experience level, I told you then it was roughly 300,000. And that's just to
We
bring them up.
addressed that at that time to a certain degree, but this is over and above that number.
No, that's not. That's including that number. It wasn't included in this year's budget. It's including that number. It's including a capital improvement request of $100,000. $85,000 of that total comes from diversion funds that we produce within our office. So 85,000 of that is coming directly from inside of our office for work that we're doing through diversions. The appeal fund was increased, I believe, 20,000 because we've come in over budget on that each year. So it just was to compensate for that overage. And then various other services, our interpreter fees have gone up. Training, travel, we have to account for the increase in fuel prices and other things. We get an increase every year in our liability insurance. There's some things that we just get an increase for every year, and so we've attempted to put that in there.
I wasn't looking at
the
just
bulk.
contractual, I was looking at strictly the personnel services line.
Right. The addition to part of that, Dwayne, too, would be we included, again, our IT person, which was removed by administration, I believe, 2 years ago. So,
Anything else right now?
Nope.
Larry?
If you're comparing counties to counties, is number of criminal filings, like-sized counties, applicable, or can we do that, or is that like trying to compare apples to oranges? You tell me.
it's like comparing apples to oranges, and that was something else that we discussed too. There's a couple of things that go on. One is, can you trust all of the state databases? I would say no.
No, but we have to.
Because the input's only as good as what the data is that's been given to that particular state agency. So what may have shown up, maybe one county reported 80%, another county reports 50% of what they've done. So it's kind of a wash there. And then just to say that we would have the same types of crimes here that Dodge City has, Seward County has, Reno County has, I don't know that that would be fair either. The things I could tell you would be an increase in felony filings over misdemeanor filings. Which that in and of itself is a more complicated type of case to prosecute.
But, when we start looking at county budget
Right.
across the state,
Right.
which we do, and comparing, our costs to other counties our similar size, we're right up there in we're the lead dog in a few of them, and that's not a good place to be.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we wish we could actually file more cases than what we do. I don't know how to compare what they're doing to what we're doing. I would say like Riley County, their municipal prosecutor's office is, I believe they have 16 municipal prosecutors, so they do all of the misdemeanors. So what Riley County handles is all felonies. So they may have a smaller caseload. I don't know that, but it's kind of hard because I don't know how every district attorney's office breaks their stuff down either.
So basically, when you start comparing our population versus their population, and on a per populate cost, we're pretty high. And that's,
No, I get it.
sure, as a taxpayer, they bring that up if they really dig into things.
Well, and the things they bring up to me are, how come my case didn't get prosecuted? How come this report didn't get taken? How come this hasn't happened? And then, you know, one of two things I either have to say is, well, either we didn't get a case from law enforcement, because that happens sometimes, that a report comes in, somebody, for whatever reason, law enforcement did not take that report or didn't take the evidence necessary, so we never saw it. Or we have to say, well, one of two things: either we don't have the evidence needed to prosecute that case, so it went back to law enforcement, or two, we don't have the personnel to handle that particular type of case. Because as we're triaging cases, we're triaging person felonies first, anything that involves harm to an actual person, and then we'll take a look at, you know, financial crimes, forgeries, identity theft, that kind of thing. So I don't know what we look like. I do know that the numbers that were in that, I did not bring it with me, in the sheet that was presented to me at the last commission meeting, when it said we only had like 400 and some traffic cases. I know that we typically run more around the 2,500 to 3,000 cases. And so I don't know why that number was off, but that's way off when we start talking about the number of cases that are being prosecuted. So
But
I don't have an answer other than I know that everyone's running short-staffed. I don't know.
well, all counties across the state are gonna be running short-staffed. That's a given.
I know.
And when you compare their costs to our costs, it's a little hard to argue with a taxpayer and say, well, we just don't have the staff to do it. And they say, yep, our cost per citizen is as high as anybody else's or higher. That's when they get excited.
The only thing I can tell you is I have presented to you what I believe in good faith is what we need to run our office.
Okay.
And, like I said, we did restore, as part of that budget, we did restore the IT person in there, because we had one that was dedicated to us, which was taken out a couple years ago. There is something that if I have to give, I'll ask for it next year. And then our part-time attorneys, that's why there's like kind of a part-time person in there. And so, if we have to give up that particular piece of an attorney, so to speak, then I can give that up. But I feel very strongly that those are there, need to be compensated as what we've stated in our budget line items. And if there's I don't know how much that would be, a couple $100,000, I would guess, is what I've just told you we could take out.
Yeah, I guess I was going to, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Just want
Go
to
ahead.
make sure Larry's done. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I guess I was just going to ask you to quantify what that part-time attorney and IT person would be. If you can't fill your full-time attorneys, I would think filling the part-time would be as difficult.
Well, we've gotten into kind of a unique situation, and I think I had told you guys that too, where I have two attorneys that are working in our office that are also county attorneys in smaller counties. And so those two, we've now come to an agreement for them to be working for us, one like 75%, one 80% of the time, which left us with that kind of weird, squishy number of a part-time attorney, because there's like 1 and 1.6 attorneys that we've got if you put those two together. And so, that's why when we say, we try to think out of the box to try to get our personnel covered, the hardest part of having an attorney like that in the office is if they're not there full-time because they're covering another county, then to give them jury trials, things, cases of that nature makes it really hard because they have to schedule around their other judges in their respective counties where they're elected officials.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else?
Well, Susan, I'm going to express to you things that should not surprise you because we have had conversations, and you and Robert and I and Kathleen had a conversation with regard to the time out of the office and a few things, and I appreciated your frankness with us, as far as your position. You and I have had several conversations with regard to salaries, and I respect that opinion. I respect the fact that cost of living here may be comparable to other areas of the state. I respect the fact that there may be less candidates to choose from the law schools and so forth and so on. But in kind of the vein that Dwayne was expressing a minute ago, the increase in personnel, what's it called? Personnel services from one year to the next is more than I have an appetite for. When I hear you say, oh, somebody just made my mic hot. When I hear you say, you know, I've got a couple of things here that might be a total of $200,000-300,000 that I might be able to eliminate from my budget. So to me, there is some room in the budget to be able to contract what you're requesting. The other is, and I have reason to believe that a couple of attorneys who have left the office haven't left just for pay reasons. And I believe that there's, as I think Dave or somebody said a little bit ago, there's other reasons than just compensation that people work at a place. I believe, too, that you have some latitude with regard to what you do in your building and so forth, and you gave us a schematic, I call them, with regard to some plans that you have, and whether you use money in your budget for that versus personnel, you know, paying people, that's your decision. You're the head of that area. But I question some of that, you know, whether that money is needed versus paying attorneys a little bit more. So I definitely, and it's not an official motion right now, but I definitely would be in favor of reducing your request this year by about $500,000, which is close to that $1 million that Robert expressed to us a little bit the other day, especially now that I've heard you say there's $200,000 or $300,000 that I might be able to absorb. I mean, you offered that just a few minutes ago. So what I would be asking then is maybe another $200,000 or thereabouts that you would have to make a decision on. Do I use that for building improvements? Do I use that for salaries? And so forth and so on. So I'm just expressing to you, I hope none of this has surprised you based on our conversations. I respect your opinion and where you're coming from, but I'm having difficulty with how much it's raising the mill levy that we're looking at in our budget today.
And I respect what you're saying. I guess what I was offering up to you was the fact that one of the positions I had put in there was one that had been taken from us. We had presented a budget a couple of years ago, and one of the reasons I had asked specifically for an opportunity to be involved in the trimming, if there needed to be any, was because in the past, it's just happened it's just happened. And then we get our budget back and we're like, wait a minute, where did this go or where did that go? The IT person was one of those, and we feel like we've come into some circumstances over the last year and a half where we could have used someone that was on board. I don't know that we have room to cut another $200,000. I can certainly take a look and see what I can do with that, but I stand firm with the idea of who we have working for us, and when we're making a job offer, we need to have the latitude to do that with a salary that's within what the Board of County Commissioners has passed, and that we keep those salaries within that pay scale. And that is essentially what I have tried to do by absorbing a piece of that in this year's budget a piece of that in next year's budget, and then looking forward to 2024, so that it was happening incrementally and not happening all at once. So I will stand by that, and I respect what you're asking of me, and I'll make an effort to do that, but I can't guarantee it would be the full amount that you're asking for.
But let me finish my thought as well, and not that you interrupted, but another piece of my thought is, and we asked the same question of the sheriff a minute ago with regard to phone and IT and so forth, and I realize law enforcement is a little different entity, if you will, I don't know if that's the right word, than some of the other departments that are internal to the county. From statutory requirements and so forth. I respect that. But the final piece that I have is, as I read the statute, with regard to what latitude you and district attorneys have, is that county commissions are charged with the responsibility of funding to a reasonable amount for the operations of that particular office. And so I don't think what I'm suggesting is unreasonable with regard to the overall budget. And if you allocate, X percent to salaries, that's what's really keeping this in operation. But improving the building and so forth, I don't know that that's necessarily keeping the county attorney's office in operation, is where my thinking is. So to me, the operation of the county attorney's office is in its people, not as much in its things. And so that's where my thought process is, and I just wanted to clarify that.
No, I understand. The only thing is we don't have a room within our building where all of our staff can be at one time for a particular training. And it makes it unwieldy to always have to have two separate staff meetings. And so part of what I was asking for was the ability to get that into a position where we could have all of our staff within our building doing trainings. And that's why it was in there. I haven't asked for those things in the past, to my knowledge. There haven't been any structural improvements to that building since it was built. So if that needs to go in a different fund, or it needs to be planned for differently, we can certainly take a look at that too. But I do think it's important, especially as we move forward with some of the things we're doing, that we be able to train all of our staff in the consistent application of policy. And when you have two separate meetings, there's always different questions that come up in one than do in another. My other cautionary thing would be, disgruntled employees are never the ones you should listen to. It's the ones that are there who are living it every day. So that may be a place to start if there are questions. And like I said, if you're going to do a management, some sort of study, I'm more than willing to take part in that. One thing I will say is I think it's pretty unfair when I've had 4 surgeries in 2 years to not at least be given some grace for that.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to point out too, I respect your comment about being a part of the budget discussion, and if something's going to be cut that you don't find out after the fact. Therefore, that's why you're here today, is because we respect the fact that you need to have a voice in this. So that's a part of addressing that piece that you referenced just a minute ago. Dave, other thoughts, or I'm going to go around the table one more time.
I'm going to tell you, Susan, I appreciate the fact that you advocate for your department. I think every county employee needs to do that. So on that, that's a feather in your hat. Dwayne used a term a while ago about sticker shock. When I heard 900,000, I then tried to figure out, okay, how many employees do you have? And is it 16 or 17 in your building?
If we were fully staffed, we would have 21.
Okay, if you had 20,
10 of those are all those with professional degrees. That would equate to 7 or more years of education. So we would have the most highly educated staff within the county. So that's, I think, where that sticker shock comes from and probably should come from.
but I took the 900,000 and in my of primitive way, just divided, if you had 16 employees, that's $56,000 per employee you're asking for. If you had 20 employees, that's $45,000 per year per employee. And that expresses my sticker shock and why I say I have, as honest as I can be with you, I have real difficulty supporting.
And that's where, when we started in April, I had informed you that there was anywhere between 25 and 35,000 per attorney that needed to be made up to become equivalent with what the Board of County Commissioners had passed in their pay scale. And so that, in and of itself, to put them squarely within that pay scale is 90% of what you're seeing.
Well, yeah, part of what's been left out of this conversation is not too many months ago, you came over and you had given your attorneys a $10,000 each raise. And you asked for the same for you.
Correct,
We granted that.
correct.
So, I think we're aware that the salaries might need a little adjustment, but I'm having difficulty with as much adjustment budget-wide as you're asking for, so. Okay,
I just wanted to make sure it was clarified that the budget adjustments become those that are in line with what the county commissioners have passed in 2019, which have not come to fruition to this point.
Do I need any further comments, questions?
I've been scribbling numbers. 865,000 increase is a 52.3% increase in your overall budget, or 1.6 mills. I kind of like Lon's deal, drop it a mill. That'd still give you a 20% increase of 330,972. So I'm kind of, that 52% is just too much.
Bob?
What is the relationship with the new wage scale that has been created with the HR department as opposed to what the county attorney has asked for, Susan had asked for in her previous request to us? Do we now have that pay scale, or is it still below what she's asking for?
The pay scale that the commission approved, in essence, is still structurally there, that if the attorney's office wants to utilize that pay scale, she can do so in that second tier. So your question is not as an easy answer, because in essence, then you'd go through that process of grading those positions to make a determination of where they fall on that pay scale, and then determination within that pay scale where they land, how far out. And that's something that we did not do with the attorney's office. All the other departments were included in that.
Okay, so previously, we had a wage scale that she was trying to fit her people into, and now
That structure is still there.
the structure's still there, and what has happened to date is that that structure's been moved up by the same percentage as all of the other departments.
Correct. Yeah, that
So it is
structure.
still significantly below what she tells us the market is. for
You know,
that.
without looking at it, it's kind of unfair to ask that question, because without looking at specifically, I don't know where they fall within the new pay structure.
So if we were to look at the old pay structure on professional grades, a grade 35, which is where I have my attorneys placed, up until last week, the minimum was 70,000 up to 130. And on a maximum, in my opinion, which statutorily is how I can present that, someone who's been there 33 years should be at the max, especially with the work that they put in and the quality with which they do it. The current pay scale, as passed last time, starts at 77, and the top is 132. So still what I'm asking is within that range. So I haven't asked to go above that range for anyone except for, I believe, my deputies.
So
But I don't believe it was significantly above that, and by statute, the county attorney gets to set the pay rate.
okay, so at this point in time, the salary structure that you have requested in your budget, your employees fit in your mind within the pay scale that's allowed. It's just a question of whether they have reached that through the qualifications, time, experience, whatever else it is.
Correct. So what I have done, I mean, I guess on the one hand, the statute says the district attorney shall determine the annual compensation of each assistant. What I've tried to do is to make that request in line with what the Board of County Commissioners has passed.
Okay, and then the second part of my question, I guess where I'm going is, as we flip through these previous deals, we have employee benefits that are over and above what we're talking about in wages and salaries.
Correct.
And it amazes me that they are as high as they are, which is about 30%. So when you put that on top of that salary, I judge that we are quite competitive. And I'm speaking back from experience as a person who's hired 50 or 60 people at a time. We always had to not only say the hourly rate, but also whatever else we're going to get before you came down to a hourly rate that is real, and be able to reinforce it. And to me, I think that's a piece we're missing when we talk about competitive wages. I think the benefit program that the county has is far and above what happens in our marketplace.
Well,
And I think we need to continue to stress that.
and we do stress that, but when we compare, so part of my conversations with the law schools have been, what are young attorneys coming out and being paid when they're working for another county prosecutor's office? So the most recent ones were Douglas and Shawnee, and there was one other smaller county that I can't remember, that all started at 80 to 85,000 plus benefits. And that would be the insurance, the capers, all of that. So, and then we were also interviewing someone from Kearney County and Hamilton County for staff, and Kearney and Hamilton cover their insurance premiums are covered 100%, and then I believe their deductibles are lower than what ours are. So again, when you start to compare apples to apples, it's pretty hard to do that because each county has a different insurance policy. But we couldn't bring over a new legal assistant from those other counties because the insurance outweighed, I mean, the benefit through insurance outweighed what we could compensate by increased hourly wage.
Well, I haven't
So,
seen many companies that do the capers deal like the county does. It's awesome. And I just,
So-
that was my only standpoint in terms of competitive wages, because it is a challenge to get and keep people. And, I think part of the problem is that we were so far behind that sooner or later we have to bite the bullet and make it right. And whether we do it in one step or whether we do it in five, that becomes the challenge of what our budget discussion is going to happen. So that's all I had.
Larry? No. One point of clarification, and I was kind of looking at both you and Robert. You, as you've previously stated, have the latitude to set salaries within your, from a statutory standpoint, in your office, except for yours. And the Board of County Commissioners has the authority to set your salary. Are we all on the same page with regard to that?
yeah,
Is that correct? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then you were talking about those ranges a little bit ago, about the maximum being 130 or 132 or something in that neighborhood. And as I look at your budget information that you presented to us early on, there's one over that amount and then two or three that are at that maximum or the 130,000 for sure. Am I reading that material correctly?
So there would be, other than myself, there was one that would exceed that, and that would be the deputy county attorney. And then the others are all within that pay range. Those at the highest level that are not considered a deputy with those additional duties are those that have been there in excess of 30 years.
All right,
So,
I just wanted to make sure we all understand.
and then, yeah, and then the balance of it's trying to catch that up and then continuing to like move those up every year at a rate that's, I guess, somewhat level with the expenses that are coming out too.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments to Susan with regard to her portion of the law enforcement budget?
I have a question for you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Are we going to ask Susan to go sit down with her budget and make some adjustments
Well, we may,
and
yeah.
come back for next week, or how are we?
No, we may do that, but I wanted to get a couple other things covered here first. But yes, we very well, and I don't anticipate she's going to be leaving the room right now, so, but we may very well be doing that, yes. Yeah. So, thank you, Susan. Appreciate you being up here, and yes, we're going to talk about the whole thing after we've covered the whole budget, and then something like that may be a part of our request. So, Robert, with that, what other parts of the is it time for break?
Yeah.
Okay.
10:30. What did you-
We have a commissioner who's
2
asked for a
hours.
break.
That's long enough.
And that's probably a reasonable request. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene about 10:40.
other budgets that you have to consider are your special revenue budgets. We went through those last time. Those are things such as funding for your GIS department and things of that nature. So, so in essence, they do not have a property tax, if you will, implication to them, or a direct property tax implication to them. And according to your last meeting, you really had no questions or concerns on any of those. The other three that we'll bring to you next Monday are your 3 sewer district budgets, and 2, if not all 3 of them, will have property tax within their district. So, but there'll be nothing extraordinary there. All right?
And refresh my memory, I know you addressed this last time, but I just don't remember what the comments were. The landfill was showing a fairly significant decrease from 22 to 23, if I remember right.
Had to do with no transfers being out of there. Mhm. Yep.
So, before we get into our questions and directions to the departments, any follow-up questions or comments with regard to those other items such as GIS and so forth that that Robert just addressed? Larry?
I was just glancing at JDC. What are your thoughts on where we are there?
Well, once again, on JDC, that's really a result of an interlocal agreement with about 15 or so different counties. And so we've accounted for those costs associated with that. If you recall, those were accepted by the JDC board to present to each one's governing body. I think it's a fair representation. I know that Beth will be looking into the, is it the secure care portion of that, Beth? And going, maybe looking at a different model in that, since that may not be the business that you want to be in. So, but once again, that will not impact your JDC. Yeah.
Bob, with regard to those GIS, JDCs, those.
Nothing.
Any questions? Dwayne, from you? Dave? Okay. All right, so then we're back to the budget as a whole. The budget as presented to us, but again, it still doesn't have that one piece in it with regard to the projected mill levy, correct? With regard to engine defense?
That is the only outstanding issue now that you'll have, and that really needs to be resolved rather thriftily this week.
And are we having the subgroup meet this week?
That's up to you.
I mean, I think it should be the subgroup that comes back to us with
Correct.
their recommendation. Who's the chair of your subgroup? Dave is?
Dave and Bob are pointing at each other.
Co-chairs. So if the subgroup for that group, indigent defense contract would please get together sometime yet this week and bring that number to us Monday, the 18th, that'd be great.
Is there some direction?
Yeah, we need to discuss it a little here today.
It's about a 60% increase. Mhm.
My experience in negotiating, you start where you started last year and say, okay, that's what we'll offer, and then go from there.
Okay, Dwayne?
Yeah, look, yeah. I like Larry's thoughts.
I do, and mine is, it just seems too much, especially in one jump, so I think we need to try to reduce it.
When in a area of transparency, when they're asking for the equivalent of a little over $140,000 per attorney per year, let's put them on the county payroll and give them benefits. I mean, this is beyond sticker shock, so.
Yeah, we trust the two of you as our representative on that interim to negotiate in good faith, so, if you would, please.
That's a significant impact on our overall budget, though. I mean, that's a significant impact on our overall budget.
That increase is, yes. Uh-huh.
Well, fourth of a mil, yeah, basically, well, fourth or a fifth of a mil.
That's more than a mil.
Well, the 100,000, I was just rounding it 100.
I'm saying to basically go from
Well,
where it was to what they want is over a mil.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, true, yeah, you're right, yeah. So we need to see if we can come to some negotiated agreement before Monday, if you would, please.
Mr. Chairman, is there any indigent defense number in this at all, period, or last year's number in here?
Last year's is in there. Yeah.
We're talking the difference.
Not the increase, that's correct, yeah. And this one, as we stated at the beginning of this meeting, shows 51.561 mil. Last year, we were at 49.944, and either of those is still gonna be above our revenue neutral rate. So, what's the board's desire as far as are you willing to move forward with the 51.561? Are you wanting to ask a department or two about decreasing? What's the board's desire? And I'm going to go around the table, and Larry, we'll start with you.
well, I just express my same thoughts that I gave when we started, that we've already seen an inflation in our appraisal values, and then you turn around and inflict a higher mill levy on the taxpayers, we may all be out of a job, which could happen anyway. But we need to, I think, be a little more in touch with what the folks that are paying the bill are gonna say to us.
Bob?
Yeah, I think we need to take a look and, I think in creating the budget, everybody kind of got to have their say of what they would like to have. And I think in going with the increased costs that we've had, I went in and had a chance to speak with Robert a little bit to try to get a little better understanding. And looking back at cost of living, when you gentlemen sat here last year and made the decision, at that time, cost of living was below 3%. And then in the next 6 months, it went crazy and it ended up at 6.8. And this year, we're at 8.7, and who knows where it's gonna be by the end of the year. So we do have to bite the bullet because it does cost more money to do what we're doing. We have the same costs as a county that everybody's experiencing. With that being said, I think we have to be prudent on making sure that the dollars we do ask for have a solid home and that we spend them appropriately. I guess if there were a goal that we could have, I would say that we aim at last year's mill levy and do what's necessary to get there.
Okay, which was roughly, and I'm rounding.
Just 50.
Roughly 50, yes. Okay? Dwayne?
I gotta echo that, we're proposed budget, we're like 4.3 million higher. If we could get down to 50, we're still over last year's dollar number, but, that'd drop at 880,000, 1.6 mils, so I think we could find 880,000.
I can't say it any better than fellow commissioners have spoken to the budget. At 50, I could vote for that, 50 mils. But these big increases in requests, they need to be pared down.
let me throw this idea out to you and see where it goes. My recommendation, my suggestion, because well, let me back up a half a step. I'm in that camp of saying it was somewhere around that 50 mil mark, close to what last year was. I think the 51.5 is too much, dollars and mill levy. So the thought that I've had over this last week is to ask the county attorney's office to reduce that budget by 500,000, which is almost a mill, and then ask Robert to go through the budget and find the other 300.
380.
Roughly, yeah, 380, roughly, and see where we can reduce the rest of the budget by that 380 approximately. So that's my recommendation. Other thoughts, Larry? No. Bob?
I think if we do something like that, we're gonna have the same continuing battle we've had all along. I don't disagree that we should reduce something on the county attorney, but I think it ought to be more in the relationship of 350. But I think there also ought to be some giving in, basically, I'm gonna say a little bit from everyone beyond that. I think significantly, the 350 in my mind is about where we need to be. But I think with Kurt doing what he's doing on his equipment utilization, I think there's probably 100,000 that could come out of their long-term capital. Number one, we probably wouldn't be able to order and get something in the 23 budget period anyway. I think in the sheriff's department, probably a similar number. I think in the health department, it has gone up significantly during the period of COVID, over a 3-year period, and it's actually more now than it was before. So I think sharing the load between the departments is an appropriate way to go. So that's the logic that I would have.
And I'll share a comment to that in just a little bit, but look over here to Dave and.
Have much to add?
No further comment.
And my comment to what Bob has said, I certainly sharing the load, I don't have a disagreement with that concept. However, I believe that based on what I saw and worked through the budgets this last week, that the other areas of the county have already shared the load, if you will, and that they have been fairly flat in their budget. So that's why I lean toward just the opposite numbers of what Bob expressed, but yet having Robert go through and see if there are some places where we might come up with 300,000 or 380 or whatever that number might be. So that's the rationale, in my opinion. I think that the other departments have already shared the load based on the presentations that we had. So you've heard two different thoughts as far as, well, you've heard one theme is try to get back to that 50 mil levy, 50 mils approximately, and I think there's consensus for that. But you've heard two different ways of getting there. So I need to hear from the other three of you on which way you think might be the best to charge Robert to reduce that 51.5.
Well, in the past, lots of times, when we came down to the really end of the things, we've transferred money out of landfill or out of the energy, that old energy.
Oil and gas.
budget we had, oil and gas.
Pollution.
But, those pots have kind of gotten smaller and smaller, so I think we need to take it out of the actual operating budget.
Dwayne? Dave?
My thoughts are the bigger departments have a bigger chance to find something that they can probably get along without for a while. The two-person department doesn't have much to whittle down. So I do have a question, though, that Susan's trouble trying to hire attorneys. I think, Susan, don't you have 2 vacant attorneys positions budgeted for right now? 2 vacant. My question is, if push comes to shove, could she cut the budgeting for the vacant positions, and then if all, mysteriously here comes an attorney out of law school and he just his whole life wanted to be a Finney County prosecutor, we could revisit that after the fact, potentially. So, but we're budgeting for people that we don't have under the present circumstance. So.
One of the problems that we have is we are typically covering roughly 6 courtrooms at a time. And so that means. One of the problems that we have is that we are trying to cover anywhere from 4 to 6 on a daily basis courtrooms at any one time, which means that if someone's on vacation or they're out for medical leave or sick or whatever it is, we kind of always have to have an attorney in the background to just kind of be there ready to take on that spot. So my fear is that we cut a space that we actually need to have and have the authority to hire. That's my fear. I mean, I understand where you're coming from because typically we have had that open slot, but if I have to come to you to ask you to hire someone, I don't have time to do that because they may get snapped up by someone else.
Dwayne, your thoughts on what way do we go to
Well,
reduce this?
I guess after Bob's comment, I'm opening up the health department. I'm looking at that, and there is significant increases there too, so. But I also agree with Dave, the small departments, there's no give there, they've already give. It's the top 3 budget departments, I think, is where we gotta look at the most.
So now I'm gonna look at Robert for a second. You've heard a couple of different thoughts, but the one that I want to focus on for a second is Larry's with regard to transfers. Do you believe that we would still have healthy fund balances if you were to use some of the funds from by transferring to lower this mill levy?
You know, I think overall, the board needs to consider what you have those monies there for. Traditionally, you set those things aside for some emergency, something that you don't have control over. In my opinion, I'm not certain that this qualifies in that situation. Additionally, as staff goes through the budget and aids the departments in developing a sound, rational budget, they don't come to you in this regards here with a big overreach. These things were not designed, the ones that I was involved in with all the departments, these are not designed to say, I tell you what, let's go in and see what we can get. That's not at all how I budget, never has been. So philosophically, seeing everybody give something just doesn't sound right to me. If everybody came in and said, you know what, let's pick on Skylar. Skylar, I'm going to pick on you. We raised the wages there for EMTs and paramedics and AEMTs and so forth. And we took what I felt was a pretty rational approach to it, taking into consideration all the other things that we have to offer. And knowing now that within the last week or two, we have neighboring counties that still provide a couple dollars per hour more per level. What does that equate to per person? Approximately $6,000 per person. We did not take that approach, nor did we take that approach with all the wage stuff. I thought we provided what we thought was competitive without overreaching. And so, I have a little bit of angst about a broad stroke approach to reducing. If I don't know, let's pick on Trista's office. If Trista came in with a $800,000 increase, yeah, I think maybe you go for that. You take a look at that. She didn't. She came in with a rational, regional approach on that. So it wasn't a big reach. It wasn't 61% or anything like that. So I guess what I'm saying is that you had some individuals that really wanted to present to you what they felt was something that they needed to provide the services as you outlined them to do.
Need versus want.
So, is there areas you can reduce in? Sure. If you don't want to fund your reserves, your replacement programs and so forth, yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
One department outside of the county attorney budget item that's been referenced a couple of times here is the health department and the increase in the health department. But when I look at the total mill levy, I think it was 0.4.
0.4, which is a couple $100,000.
Right. But any specific comments, and I know Shrudi's here in the audience as well, but any particular comments with regard to the health department budget that maybe we've missed outside of the comments we heard earlier?
Well, I guess I'm wanting to know specifically what seems to be a bit askew, or what perceives to be a bit askew with the health department. As you realize, within the things that you're mandated to provide, public health is one of them. In fact, quite honestly, public health in any county is quite honestly probably the easiest budget to prepare, because they're so much driven by the programs that they're required to provide. So as you look at that, I'm kind of curious what that may look like. Now, I don't know whether it's the attempt to, you have your general health program and then all the various grants that you have there, which are offset by grant revenues. And once again, I'll make that statement again, that traditionally in the past, the county's transferred anywhere on an annual basis of $150,000 to $225,000 into the health department, and I didn't do that. Now, I guess I can go back and we'll increase the general fund by $150,000, $200,000 and decrease the health department, and then show that transfer in if you'd rather see it that way. But that to me doesn't make sense, and quite honestly doesn't represent the true cost of operating the health department, which I feel you have in front of you. So and additionally, if you look across the top of that budget as well, you see where the fund balance has decreased. And so that's another part of the math problem, if you will, of trying to right-size that. And I'll leave.
So what guidance do we want to give Robert and the staff with regard to getting down to about 50 mils? Dave?
It's his expertise in budgeting that he can probably figure this out. He's got a little better understanding of needs as opposed to wants, probably than we do, but we kind of put that in his lap to decide what is a need and what is a want and come up with some suggestions for us.
Dwayne?
Off the top, nothing just really jumps out. Again, I keep going back to the three largest budgets, and they seem to be having the most logical place to trim from. When you have big increases, it's not all inflation that's doing it, so there's something going on.
Bob?
I think I'm still where I was before, so.
We haven't asked anything about outside agencies about, they're basically, most of them were flat, weren't they?
They all are, yes.
Left them at 22.
Yeah.
Is there any consideration of using a piece of the ARPA funds to make this first big step, since we made a significant step in wages this year?
Once again, we already have within your budget, or for 23, transfer of 1.5 million being proposed to shore up those wages.
So in 24, when we start budgeting for 24, those monies will have to be budgeted for then.
You're correct, yes, that's correct. And
That's going to come and haunt us.
The 1.5 you mentioned, we moved some money for the sewer district out of that first 3.5 million. And we were going to use ARPA if needed. You're saying that there is already 1.5 million in this budget?
yes, as I presented 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, is that's already incorporated in that. And we spoke about that during the approval of the wage increases as well.
For the market adjustment schedule.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still about 1 mil from the county attorney's budget, and then charging our administration to try to figure out where the other 380 comes from, whether it's be a combination of transfers and the budget cuts or what, but that's still where I am. So, to get the discussion moving a little more, I will put a motion on the table that we ask our administrator to reduce the county attorney budget in conversation with our county attorney as far as line items within that budget by approximately 1 mil or 500,000. And the remainder of the what would that be, about 1.5 mils would be at the administrator would work with the other budgets to reduce that. So that'd be about 380. So approximately 1 mil from county attorney's budget, the rest of it from other budgets. That's my motion.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with your motion, but I think you're a week early, respectfully. We get the figures, and then we can
Well, this is just to direct him how to get to those numbers, and then next week we'd have a motion on the table to adopt, whatever mill levy.
Yeah, your motion next week would then be to approve authorization for sending it to the county clerk.
But I'm trying to give some firm direction to the administration between now and next Monday is the reason for my motion.
Well, I think with the discussion we've had amongst the commissioners, that a consensus, I think Robert's probably got a consensus of what we're all thinking. You need a formal motion.
Well, I guess I'll look to him, because I don't know if I were sitting in his chair, I don't know if I'd know what to do.
If you are going to reduce budgets that are really out of my purview, such as the county attorneys, that's something that you'll need to make a decision on. If your direction is then to look at opportunities to get down to 50 mills or less, you're at 49.944 now. If that's the target, whatever that is, well, then I'll work in that direction. Also keeping in mind that you still have a bogey out there on the indigent defense,
Right.
which that 380,000 could possibly be 480, whatever. So
Mr. Chairman,
Well,
after
yeah,
Robert's
well,
discussion about,
My motion's died for lack of a second, just so.
I was just giving you a second.
Well,
because
I was, okay, all right, go ahead, go ahead.
I'll
The
give you
motion's
a
still out there
I
then.
will second that. That gives Robert
Okay,
leeway to understand that the county attorney budget is our deal, and that gives direction from the board on the county attorney part of that budget. So I'll second that motion.
okay, all right. Took you a while.
Took me a while.
I thought it had died, but,
Doesn't mean
Think-
it's gonna pass.
things don't die, in the state and local government, so,
I said, with that directive, would one of you volunteer to sit down with me so they can see where the numbers are being removed or transferred?
my motion was directing our administrator to do that.
Oh, I thought he had,
No, well, my motion was for you to sit down and figure out which line items it was coming from, but we're trying to reduce the budget by a mill. And then out of the other budgets, to figure out, that's your discretion, to figure that out. So as our representative in response to your request, my motion was to have Robert be that representative.
okay, I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought he had said back to you that it was in your purview, so that's why
Well,
I,
It is in our purview, that's why he was asking us for an official motion with regard to your budget.
I just wanted to be clear, so that when we have
No.
those numbers that are
Sorry,
returned,
I
that you.
wasn't clear on that, but I was directing, my motion was directing Robert to be our representative in that discussion. Other clarifications with regard to the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer an amendment. I would like to move that our administrator look at the current budget with the goal of creating a 50 mil limit on the budget, and come back with a recommendation as to which departments it comes from.
There's a motion for an amendment. Hearing no second, it dies for lack of a second. The motion and the reason that I put that out on the table is because Robert doesn't have the discretion with the county attorney's budget like he does the others. And yet I believe it's the administrator's responsibility to help us set this overall budget. So that was the gist of my motion, and that's why he recommended that we have a motion when it affects a budget that he doesn't have the discretion over like he does some of the others. So the motion to restate it, and Gabby, are you doing minutes? Okay, is to ask Robert to represent our board with the county attorney's budget to reduce that budget by nearly $1 million or approximately $1 million, and then use his discretion on the remainder of the budget departments to come to a mill levy that's close to 50 mills.
Okay.
Is that what you seconded?
That's what I seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Okay, so that's between now and next Monday. Next Monday, we will do a vote on the entire budget, on whether or not, or what we want to have published, and we'll go forward with the hearing notices and so forth from that. So, anything else for the good of the order today? If not, one last just announcement. Don't forget, in this room, tonight at 6:30 is the County Commission Forum, and tomorrow night is the forum for the representatives for District 122 and 123, also in this same room at 6:30 tomorrow. So 2 forums in this room the next 2 evenings. With that, we're adjourned till next Monday.